we have to be the rising tide that raises all boats. We either swim together or we sink together. We survive and thrive together or we self-destruct together. So this work over the past 50 years has led me to the formulation of the 7 statements, which I think are defensible empirically. I think there's plenty of evidence in support of them. And if individuals could adopt those 7 statements as their belief system, and if those beliefs rose to the level of conviction, and if those convictions rose to the level of behavioral decisions, formation of attitudes and values, and ethics, we would have heaven on earth. It's all we need. We don't need to complicate things beyond those few observations of reality.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Bernard Beitman, MD. Yeah, I'm a psychiatrist. I study meaningful coincidences, among other things. And what I'm interested now in is the direction of humanity, which looks to me as self-destructive. It looks suicidal. Yeah, I'm a psychiatrist. I can say things like that, but it looks like we are on a path to destroying our habitat, which will destroy us as it does with any other animal living out there in planet Earth. And how are we going to go about changing that trajectory? Well, our guest today is deeply committed to doing that. And how he thinks about it, we will be getting into, but we will also get into one of his major interests, which is near-death experiences. Welcome to the show, John Odett. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm glad for our original discussion. Mr. Odett is the author of Loved by the Light, True Stories of Divine Intervention and Providence, available on Amazon.com. He's also contributed several chapters to books by other authors about spiritually transformative experiences and non-local consciousness. John earned a Master of Science degree from Virginia Tech. His professional career spans over 3 decades of senior executive positions in hospitals and hospice administration and physician practice management, as well as performing arts and, performing arts. Hey, good one, John, and public broadcasting. He is the principal founder of the International Association for Near-Death Experiences. And if you don't know about this IANS, you should, because it is huge. It has had a major impact on the way people understand and experience near-death experiences. When John started with this, it was kind of a weird thing for anybody to pay attention to. Now, thousands and thousands of people are able to feel confident in reporting NDEs to other people. He's also the primary founder and CEO of Eternia. John, welcome to Connecting with Coincidence.
Well, thank you, Bernie. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Now, there's a lot of things that we can get into. One of the things that I'd like to be able to ask you is for a coincidence story that that has really affected you.
Well, the coincidence that happened to me when I was in the military comes to mind. The year was 1972. The place was Augusta, Georgia. I was stationed at Fort Gordon, now called Fort Eisenhower. I was driving down the main entrance to the fort, and the soldier ran in front of me. I had to brake abruptly to avoid hitting him, and I looked up to make sure he was okay, and he was smiling at me and waving as if to say that he was sorry for running in front of me, and I recognized him to be my best friend from high school days. I did not know he was stationed at Fort Gordon. I quickly parked my car and we had a reunion, and It was quite delightful, surprised him, surprised me, and that stands out in my mind as one of my chief
That
coincidences.
that's pretty amazing. And there's more to say about him, but there's also how did it happen? And you've gotten into enough thinking beyond regular scientific thought to be able to possibly answer the question of how is it in your mind that you and he cross paths in such a dramatic way?
That is an excellent question. It's one of those imponderables. One can offer hypotheses, but I will say that in my book, Love by the Light, I talk about this concept which I call cosmic choreography,
Yeah,
and I distinguish it from simple coincidence. A fellow psychiatrist who's no longer with us, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, used to say there are no accidents. There are no such things as coincidence. Well, some things, the word happenstance comes to mind. Some things may not be altogether that significant, at least not in real time. They might turn out later to be quite significant. But then there are other things which are quite elaborate, much more sophisticated and intricate, which I call a synchronicity. And well, I even, as I say, coined the term cosmic choreography to go beyond synchronicity, as in the case of How I Met Raymond Moody. Um, how these things happen, which is your question, is a mystery. But to me, they signal and suggest the magnificence of creation and the fact that there are many different ways of knowing, many different ways of perceiving, many different ways of processing the data that come in through our senses, the five senses, and then the other senses that we talk about, like intuition and instinct, but don't really have a good understanding of. So for me, Tim and I had a very interesting dance throughout high school and the Army. And in some ways, Tim was the person the soldier that was running across the highway who I almost hit with my car. Tim Weir was his name. He died that same year in 1972, killed in a car accident. And in direct ways, I'm responsible for the fact that he decided to enlist in the Army. And I always felt a little guilty about that. His mom, who was a close friend of mine, sort of helped me to process all that because he actually enlisted in the Army because of me. And if he had asked me for my advice on that, I would have advised him not to do it. But Tim needed me and I needed him at that point in time. We were both going through challenges having to do with the Vietnam War, principally, and what he was seeing as a medic firsthand. So I was able to help him through a tough time, and he was able to help me. So it was, the bonds of friendship were strong, and I mourned greatly when we lost him in May of '72. But how that all came about, the fact that we ran into each other almost literally, is it's one of life's little miracles. We have miracles around us every day. And to me, it's very symbolic of how elegant the universe is, how magnificent creation is.
What if I were to suggest to you that people meet each other in strange ways, in strange places, not unlike what you just described? That this cosmic choreography, it's a wonderful term. What I've come up with is something more based on our individuality namely that because of the bond between the two of you, that you could track each other in real time and space, and that you could figure out a way, kind of like human GPS, to cross paths.
Yes. Well, this gets into Rupert Sheldrake's work, morphogenic fields. And as I say, these are the great imponderables. It's a wonderful hypothesis, and it may actually, in time, be more than a hypothesis. It may come to a place of scientific acceptance, as how reality works, how the different ways in which we interact.
Different ways we know things. And I did an experiment here in Charlottesville to see if I could end up at two different people's houses, different experiments, right when they came out of the door of their house.
Well,
And I followed my intuition, and I got lost for the second one. I've been over there plenty of times, but I got lost.
yeah.
And for the first one, I went right over there, and there was just sat there, and nothing was happening. And then she gets out of the car. She's in a car. She's in the car. She gets out of the car. Right. I'm waiting there for about a minute or two. The second one, her car is there, and I'm saying, okay. And she comes out of the house while I'm sitting there. So this was operationalizing the idea that intuitively, whatever we mean by that, we can track where somebody else is. And so that was a little bit of evidence that decisions we make, just as how you decided to go when down that road and how your friend decided to run across the road, then these are more choreographed by the bond that connected the two of you.
Well, Rupert Sheldrake's work sort of demonstrates that, what he attributes to the morphogenic field. He's done some tremendous study
Yes.
of animal behavior of pet owners, and their bond with their pets, and how the pets know what's going on with their owner, even non-locally. I mean, he
Oh
did one.
yeah. Oh yeah,
Yes,
this is non-local, and we can rather than talk about that anymore. Let's just say it happens. The
yes.
difference with the pets is they know when the owner's coming home, or they can find the home if they're lost.
Mhm.
Cats can do that too. That's different from two humans crossing the street together as it happened to you. It's two things in motion. But that's just another hypothesis that I'm suggesting to you. I'd rather get on to some of the other questions, because you are so deeply embedded, have been for such a long time, in near-death experiences, that and that research with Bruce Grayson and me suggests that people with NDEs tend to have more synchronicities after the NDE than they had before. And I wonder if you could speculate about why you think that might be the case.
Well, the literature uh, has abundant examples of people coming back from the near-death experience with newly acquired abilities and talents, such as psychic ability, enhanced intuition, ability to heal. They may come back with the ability to play music, compose and play music when before they had no musical training. They may come back with artistic ability that they didn't have before. So it's not uncommon for people who have had the extensive, profound near-death experiences to be markedly changed in a myriad of ways. Uh, one of which, of course, would be a greater propensity for synchronicity. I mean, my take on that is they're awake and aware. They're spiritually illuminated. They've been outside the body, many for the first time. They've traveled to another dimension of reality. They have encountered deities, many subjects describe the deity as Jesus or God, but a supreme being of some kind. They often have a life review. So, and they come back, they don't want to come back, most of them, but they do because they have some purpose to serve. So a profound epiphany such as that is bound to be highly impactful and transformative in any number of ways, including greater propensity for synchronicities.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That is a beautiful description of the mind expanding potential that most NDEers experience, and that would include increased synchronicity. So that's a great description. One of the things I started off with at the beginning, John, is your heartfelt drive to do something about humanity's suicidal trajectory now. And people with NDEs become more capable of marshaling capacities that ordinary people do not have because they haven't had those experiences. How have you had an NDE? I didn't ask that.
No, I have not.
And neither has Bruce Grayson. And so you get to study them, and that's a very, very, very key part of all this. How how do you think that we who are aware of the potential humanity is creating for itself, the negative potential, how are you thinking about doing something about changing the course of that trajectory?
Great question. It's the reason I wrote Love by the Light. It's the reason I conceived the International Association for Near-Death Studies originally in 1974. And I can only say that having given this a great deal of thought for over 50 years, the only solution to all that ails us, that can get us on a sustainable path toward an optimal future for Earth and all its inhabitants, is inherently and necessarily a spiritual solution. We have to find a way to retire egocentrism, nihilism, materialism, and frankly, greed. If we cannot do that, then I don't have a very optimistic view of our future. So as the thought that I have given all of this leads me to one conclusion. And it's the same conclusion, by the way, that all the great masters, avatars, spiritual teachers have given over the millennia, including the French mathematician Blaise Pascal, who had an NDE in 1674, and he wrote a book called Think. I think it came out in 1675. And in that book, he talked about the God-shaped hole. It was the first time that concept had been introduced. And he said he didn't have a location for it, but he described what it is. And it's this yearning to connect with something greater than oneself, a hunger, a spiritual thirst. And I think we suffer greatly from the God-shaped hole in today's world. We have lost sight of our spiritual side, and that's the problem, because we think this body is all there is. We think this life is all there is. And to my way of thinking, there are only two ways one can live one's life. The first is that nothing matters, that there is nothing after life. There are no transcendent consequences to earthly behavior. And of course, the other is the opposite point of view, which is that this life is the blinking of an eyelid, and when the body dies, the spirit is liberated and goes on to enjoy continued existence. I happen to believe in the latter point of view, not based on faith and dogma, but based on data, evidence. I've studied it for 50 years. So I believe, talk about cosmic choreography and coincidence and synchronicity, I believe this work chose me in starting at the age of 8 in 1960, when I heard my first near-death experience story from my best friend's mom. And that primed the pump. And then I went on to meet Raymond Moody, who was in medical school in 1974 when we met. And he was doing the research that led to Life After Life. But all of the things that had to happen for me to meet Raymond were amazing. I mean, I don't know how that happens accidentally or randomly. So, and then when I organized the first talk Raymond gave, major talk on NDEs, and it was at Augusta College in Augusta, Georgia, which is nearby where he was attending medical school. And oh my gosh, I mean, I lit up like a Christmas tree. And I said, this is the solution. I'd always been very sensitive to human suffering. And I was agnostic when I met Raymond, and I was very much in search of an antidote. How can we do better as a species? How can we pull ourselves out of the tar pits? How can we stop clubbing each other with femur bones and enjoy a much better reality? What could be a catalyst to bring that about? Well, there Raymond was on stage giving it to me, wrapped up neatly like a present. And that's when I received this, I want to call it a download from spirit, because I didn't know what it was at the time, but I don't know how else to describe it. I don't know where symphonies come from to the composer, songs or artwork, but it's the same sort of process. This idea came whole to part. And I was so excited. I said to Raymond, Raymond, this is powerful stuff. This is more powerful than all the thermonuclear weapons on the planet. If we can harvest and harness the power, not just of near-death experiences, but the vast array of spiritually transformative experiences, we have an empirical basis for believing in life after death. And if we can get that far, then we can shift the paradigm from every man for himself to all for one and one for all. We can fill the God-shaped void that Blaise Pascal talked about, and we can redefine ourselves in spiritual terms, and we can get on the same page as the mystics with unconditional love and oneness. So that's sort of a long-winded way of answering your question.
Oh, that was that was beautiful. I felt the love and energy in you in describing how you went from 8 years old to Raymond Moody and starting the IONS, at the International Association for Near-Death Experience. That was your song that you just sang, that I could feel. So it, thank you for that. That's a good way to get to know you, and for our audience to get to know you. Now, from that, I have, from a psychiatric perspective, particularly from a psychotherapy perspective, I've done a lot of psychotherapy. I've written 2 books on the subject, and I'm a bit challenged by what I keep finding in spiritual groups, people who may have the same heartfelt feeling that you are describing, but who organize themselves in groups, and they become people interacting with each other. And you're smiling. Why don't you tell us why you're smiling, John?
Well, I don't want to be presumptuous, Bernie, but I think I know where you're going.
I know you do. So go ahead.
Well, this is how religions form, how dogmas form. It's how we get warlords guarding their own fiefdoms, and my God is better than your God, and that's why I am quick to always say, I'm a proponent of the 7 statements, which one can go to eternia.org and find the 7 statements. They are a distillation of everything I've learned, 50 years of studying this subject.
Well,
But
tell us the 7 statements, John.
well, they're predicated on a convergence model. And the convergence model, it has kind of the 3-legged stool, the proverbial 3-legged stool. It's the traditional cornerstone teachings of the major religions. It's the observations and pronouncements of the great spiritual teachers, avatars, mystics. And finally, it's the findings, the general findings of, I call it frontier science, because mainstream science isn't there yet, but frontier science in its study of non-local consciousness and spiritually transformative experiences. So I try to stay grounded in data and evidence. I try to make certain that all my opinions, philosophies, perspectives are defensible and grounded in credible evidence. Now, I don't call it proof because I couldn't go into a court of law or into a scientific forum or a scientific journal and claim that there is proof. What there is, however, is a compelling body of evidence that leads to the conclusions that I offer in the 7 statements. And I'm quick to point out that, look, if knowledge expands and we have new information that justifies revising anyone or all of these statements, I'd be the first to do it, because it's truth that I'm after. I'm only interested in truth, not half-truth and not falsehood. That said, I'm trained in sociology, so I'm sort of a macro thinker. And I think one of our big problems here is that across the globe, social ideologies have eroded. We don't know who we are as a species. We don't know why we're here. Science tells us that this is the only lifetime we have. So get while the getting's good, which kind of spawns the every man for himself attitude. And that's a recipe for disaster. When you contrast that with oneness, non-duality, unconditional love, then you move into a new paradigm, which I call the all for one and one for all paradigm, that the same God who made you made me. So we're kin. And the chain can only be as strong as its weakest link, the Achilles heel phenomenon. So we have to be the rising tide that raises all boats. We either swim together or we sink together. We survive and thrive together, or we self-destruct together. So this work over the past 50 years has led me to the formulation of the 7 statements, which I think are defensible empirically. I think there's plenty of evidence in support of them. And if individuals could adopt those 7 statements as their belief system, and if those beliefs rose to the level of conviction, and if those convictions rose to the level of behavioral decisions, formation of attitudes and values and ethics, we would have heaven on earth. It's all we need. We don't need to complicate things beyond those few observations of reality. And the first, which is probably where most people are going to get hung up, is consciousness is not an epiphenomenon of the brain. That consciousness is non-local, and it exists independent of the brain and the physical body. The second is that consciousness transcends the body at death and goes on to enjoy continued existence. Now, I stop where the data stop. I don't speculate beyond what the data allows. I've talked to hundreds of people who've had near-death experiences and after-death communication and past life recall and shared death experiences and out-of-body experiences, epiphanies of one kind or another. And I see that I watch their gestures, and I study their facial countenance, and I look at their emotion. And if you're feeling passion for me and telling you the story, well, I got it from them because I listened to so many tell their stories. Some were religious, and they didn't become more religious. They simplified their belief system. It changed their belief system to a few simple premises. They lost their fear of death. They became more loving, more giving, more generous, more altruistic. And when I saw this, not just in real time, over the course of 5 decades, studying hundreds of people who've reported these experiences, but going back in history, Raymond was very interested in historical accounts, and for good reason, because they're identical to contemporary accounts. As far back as you want to go, to Plato and beyond, they are consistent with contemporary accounts. So that has to be added into the equation. So, to me, this information was very powerful and paradigm shifting. And the 7 statements was my effort to distill everything I had learned in just a few sound bites. I gave you 2 of them. The third is that the universe is interconnected and interdependent and interrelated. The whole is in the part is in the whole. That we're part of a vast matrix of creation, and that what we do to others, we do to ourselves. So, and this is over the course of eternity. Reincarnation comes in one of the statements as well, because there's plenty of data that suggests that this is not the only lifetime we will lead in a physical form. I'm not saying that we only live as humans or that we only live on Earth, but the data is very compelling, including right there. I know you were in Charlottesville on my favorite university, the University of Virginia, and the Division of Perceptual Studies is there, and they've done some phenomenal work on the subject of reincarnation. Jenny Cockle's book, Across Death and Time, is excellent. First-hand report where she had spontaneous recall. So the fact that we live it again and again seems to be empirically validated. And there are some things that just cannot be explained. And this is where my problem with mainstream science. I said, look, if you can't explain it, that doesn't mean, therefore, that you should ignore it or dismiss it or reject the default hypothesis, which for me is take the experiencer at face value. It means you need to look into this a lot further in the many different ways of knowing to come to a conclusion. You'll never, you can't prove anything in a court, hardly ever in a court of law or in a scientific forum. Proof is an extremely difficult standard to meet, as Raymond will be happy to tell you, trained in philosophy as well as medicine. So I'm not interested in proof. I'm interested in compelling evidence that is sufficient to get us from where we are, which, as you say, as a psychiatrist, homicidal and suicidal, to where we could be, which is heaven on earth. I've been in search of a catalyst that can trigger a global spiritual awakening, not based on faith and dogma, but based on comprehension of credible evidence. Because only then can we move as a collective to retire egocentrism, materialism, and dualism, and nihilism. And if we can get there, I know it's a big if, we can have a chance at a new paradigm that will give us an optimal future for Earth and all its inhabitants. Now, your colleague, Bruce Grayson, fellow psychiatrist, I'm going to channel Bruce here. He would say, John, Jesus Christ couldn't do it. What makes you think you can? In psychiatry, we call this a messianic complex. I'm like, hey, Bruce, I don't think I'm Jesus Christ, not even close. I got to live a million lifetimes before I could even possibly get into that vibration. And I'm not saying that I can be successful. I'm just saying that I've got to try because the alternative is unthinkable. To me, the alternative is that we continue to shoot ourselves in the foot. We continue to be the victims of flawed perceptions of reality, flawed thinking, leading to poor choices. We keep making poor choices. We got to do that.
Excuse me, John. What you're doing now is what unfortunately I hear too much of what's wrong.
Yeah,
And there's a lot, people can do what you just were doing
yeah.
ad infinitum of what's wrong
Mhm.
currently. There's a lot wrong currently. What I'm interested in is and what we need from you is what can we do about what's so badly wrong? And you have an idea. You're not a messiah. I'm not a messiah. But together, as a group of people, we can realize a messianic idea. And that's why I'm emphasizing the collective human organism to organize ourselves so that we can together create the circumstances that will bring about the transformation that we are seeking. And that's what I'm asking you about. How will that happen? How can we organize people, not just you, not just me, many of us, to bring about the spiritual transformation that you so dearly know would be helpful to humanity?
Well, Bernie, we're just now meeting in this podcast, but let me just say, I love you. You're great. I love that. I love what you just said. And that is the key
Thank
question.
you. Thank
And
you.
that's why I wrote the book, Love by the Light. I am a very private person. I had many opportunities to publish my own book over the years. I declined all of them, this traditional publishing. I declined all of them because I really didn't feel I had anything unique to contribute to the literature. And I didn't feel that I necessarily wanted to offer myself as some kind of um, a spiritual beacon. Um, but I have been blessed with some very compelling teachers. When I say teachers, I mean, mentors, of course, like Kubler-Ross and Raymond Moody, um, but the people who've had these epiphanies impressed me uh, as authentic. Now, some of them, very few, were fabricated cases, but the vast majority, I want to say 98%, 99%, are genuine and authentic. And they had these profound, life-changing, transformative experiences. I've seen it happen in hundreds of cases, if not thousands, and I've seen it happen based on the historical literature. Uh, So I wrote the book. It's divided in three parts. The first part is how I, kind of evolved from being an agnostic and a materialist to being a spiritual individual with full knowledge, not faith, but knowledge that we live beyond the body. And that's the first part. I talk about angel stories, angel experiences that were life-saving. The second part is all kinds of other exceptional experiences that led to my conclusion that the spiritual reality is real and valid. The third part gets to your question, which is, well, what does all this mean? And how does it apply to the individual? How can the average person benefit from what I'm saying? And I give very specific examples in there and very specific guidance, the way you can take my word for it and the word of all those who've had these tremendous experiences, not just near-death experiences, but the whole vast array. There are a gazillion books now on the subject, and you can learn from them and be inspired by them and change based on what they're observing. But if that's not enough, and for probably 90%, 99% of the people, it isn't enough. Because seeing is believing, and it's got to be real to them, not intellectually, but experientially. So how does one go from being curious, well, gee, I want to learn more, to tiptoeing in the waters of actual experience, to the point of having your own epiphany? So in the last part of the book, I get into how to strengthen one's connection with spirit. I call them induction techniques, and I offer on a couple dozen different induction techniques that have been known to bring about epiphanies. And I explain them in detail in this third part of the book. But for those who don't want to have their own epiphany, and for those who do not want to take of the word of other people like myself, I said, well, okay, do yourself, at least give yourself permission to do one simple exercise. And I borrow from the wisdom of Ben Franklin and his 13 virtues. And he says, all one needs do is emulate Socrates and Christ. So I talk about Blaise Pascal and filling the God-shaped hole by emulating Christ or God. And how does one do that? When the subject of source creator is another imponderable. We don't really know what source creator is all about. I personally don't use a pronoun because I don't think source creator has a gender. But, I say I think there's general consensus that source creator is love, unconditional love. And I describe how the universe works. And what is this body and the breath I take and my heartbeat and my ability to think and have this conversation, if not a miracle? What is it? How did this come about in some kind of random fashion? So for me, the evidence is pretty clear that God exists and that God is love, and that God gives that love unconditionally and non-judgmentally to all creation, not just those who are on the righteous path and walking the straight and narrow, but to those who are the dregs of humanity as well. Everybody's entitled to the sunshine and to the oxygen and to the terra firma and what it produces. That's unconditional love. So God is love. So I say, look, let's demystify God. Let's demystify enlightenment. And that's what I try to do in the third part. Call the exercise God for a day. It could be love for a day, love for an hour, love for a week, whatever you can manage. But the idea is to step outside of ego, to not seek recognition or acknowledgement or reward or reciprocity. Just go out and be a purveyor of love, not just to other human beings, but to the earth and to the animals. Give love however you can, wherever you can, as often as you can. Now, I've done it 3 times. I've done the God for a day exercise, as I describe in my book, 3 times. I don't discuss it in any great detail because I feel that's inappropriate. I don't want to do chest beating, and I don't want any of the people that I interacted with to understand what that was all about. So for me, it's important to keep it anonymous and to keep the details private. But I will say this, it was my highest high, better than any orgasm, to try to go into pure love. Now, one of the ways you can bring about an epiphany, the entheogens, drugs, the so-called psychedelics, which have a lot of clinical value and they're gaining in acceptance now as therapeutic agents, but we're talking psilocybin mushrooms, ecstasy, LSD, peyote, ayahuasca, ibogaine, etc. I am timid when it comes to all that stuff, but I did I did take ecstasy once at the encouragement of a great friend. And I swore I'd never do it again because, whoa, I mean, it peeled off all the layers of inhibition. And I was just pure love. And I did not want to even step on the grass. I was hugging the trees. Didn't hallucinate, but I was, it really reduced me to, or I should say, it liberated me to become who I truly am when I'm not in ego, which is a purveyor of pure love. So if everybody gets on board with that, or at least a critical mass, if they can step outside of their own skin, outside their own ego, outside of the principle of self-interest, and embrace this idea of oneness and loving one another and seeing everything as interrelated and part of the grand whole that all came from the same source creator and that all will return to the same source creator, then we got a shot, Bernie, at getting to this heaven on earth concept where all for one and one for all prevails.
Well, thank you for that, John. In my opinion, you're a little too modest about what your experiences are, and I think they should be yet more broadcast, but that's my idea because the love is in you. I could feel it underneath, but it wasn't there in the way that I think you can express it. And here was an opportunity for you to do just what you were talking about, and you didn't because of your own modesty and or however or whatever restraint you have on yourself. So as a listener to you, I would have appreciated, I still will in the time we have left, to feel the love that's so much brimming in you and to feel wants to find expression, because that is how you are best feeling about you, and that isn't you. It's about how you are in the world. And I'm beginning to think more than I had thought about what's your message is that God for a day, a love for a day, love everybody. I met somebody who seems to embody that and who understands my ideas about self-observer as we were talking about, but and how there's more to it than what we mean by love, because love is a many splendored thing with many splendors in it, and we still are having to figure out what that is. I have experienced divine love, and I asked some people at the Science and Medical Network conference I went to a couple of weeks ago, how many of you have experienced divine love? And about a third of them raised their hands. So they had some idea about what we're talking about. It's that divinity coming through us, that love that you're talking about that's there, that we can tap into. And I've had a little bit of problem with the way people relate to each other in spiritual communities. There get to be power plays. People want to be more loved by the leader, for example, or get involved with each other in ways that cross too many boundaries, that they bring their own psychological history into the relationships in the group. And they say they're very spiritual, but no, they get kind of nasty because they get their past is triggered by people in the present. And I wonder how people in the present in the spiritual group. And I wonder if you've seen that, and if so, how do you think about approaching it?
Well, another great astute question, Bernie.
Thank
Yes,
you.
I've encountered that more than I care to admit throughout my 50 years, and it's human nature, and it's just another manifestation of silly ego. And you know, there are those who are truly in service to greater good, and they have ego in check and restraints, or let's just say in proper perspective. And then there are those who are still victims of ego and they've fallen deeply into the trap and they pursue the agenda of self aggrandizement. I'm only interested in one thing. I'm interested in social change, global transformation.
I am too.
I'm interested in an optimal future for Earth and all its
I am
inhabitants.
too. I'm with you. I'm trying to say in the time we have left, what do you do about the self-aggrandizement?
Well, I like to put it to people this way when it comes to the whole subject of ego. I've developed software, which I mean, I shouldn't say, I have conceived software, which I would like to develop, which is a tool for this purpose. But when funding arrives, I will proceed with the development of it. But um, you know, people ask me, well, what's the purpose of life? In my mind, to my humble opinion, there's only one purpose for our being here, and that is to optimize our life review on the other side. And I go, what are you talking about? What do you mean by that? Well, we've gotten the cliff notes thanks to, people like Raymond Moody, uh, who've done the hard work. They've done these great studies about people who've been to the other side and returned. And Ken Ring talked about it in his book, Lessons from the Light. He says, you know, the most important part of the NDE is the life review. Why is that so? Because it is the single most powerful element um, in terms of its impact here on other human beings on Earth in real time. Why? Because this is what awaits us all. We're all going to have this life review. So we should understand what it means. There you are in front of this being, this deity. There's no judgment. There's no external judgment. There's only love, powerful love, indescribable love. But everything is there panoramically, instantaneously. Everything, every thought, every feeling, every action. Not only that, but its impact on the totality, the ramifications, the implications, the consequences. It's all there, and you see it. And it's a binary process. That which you did, which is loving, and that which you did, which is not loving. That which you did, which is loving, resonates with the Supreme Being because the Supreme Being is only love, perfect, pure love. Now, if your goal is to hang there with the Supreme Being and never return, but to integrate fully with the source from which you came, well, in order to do that, you've got to be only love to match the frequency and vibration. If you've got this lifetime that's 50, 60, 70, 80, 90% unloving stuff, you're far from arriving at the frequency and vibration that will allow this reintegration to occur. So when I say optimize your life review, I mean live a life that is only loving, kind, compassionate, empathetic, altruistic, and humble. And if you do that, when you do get to the other side, and we all will eventually, like the mortician who signed his letters, eventually yours, we all will eventually get there. Okay. And it's the blinking of an eyelid. I just turned 72 and I can't believe it. I was 22 yesterday. Where did the time go? This life is, time is a cosmic trickster. And this life is the blinking of an eyelid. I directed 2 hospice programs. I've seen a lot of people transition. I help them with their transition. I know what that's all about. I know better than to take this suit of clothes, this temporary suit of clothes, too seriously. So I want to know, what's the prize? Well, the prize is reintegration with Source Creator. That's my opinion. It's not one of the 7 statements. That's my opinion based on the data. It's an extrapolation. And I know that I'm going to have a life review, and I want to be proud of every single moment. I don't want to regret anything. And if I can pull that off, maybe I don't have to come back to a penal colony again. This is a penal colony. We've made it that way. It doesn't have to be that way. So that's my answer. Optimize your life review. Be loving, unto all things. What is love? It's not that. I'm not talking about, eros. I'm talking about agape, of course. I'm talking about, you know, the different dimensions of love, which are probably synonyms like kindness, goodness, empathy, altruism, humility, generosity. Be that as best you can.
That was great. That was great. I mean, you really do vacillate between speaking from your heart and speaking intellectually. From what I can hear of you, when you speak from your heart, I can feel it, man. It's like there. And this is the you that even in this discussion, I would have liked to see more of, because that is what you want to do, is to optimize your loving. And when it comes out, I mean, makes me a happy guy. I can feel it. And this last 10 minutes or so and a time earlier is really John Odett uh, boldly loving, expressing his love. And I hope our listeners and viewers can capture these times of yours in as they review this, because you are not only, particularly the last part, talking about what people should do, you are demonstrating the direction of what you want your life review to be able to include. And hey, God, include this part in it. It's all there, but it's one of the best parts right here. So, and I know it's stronger even than what I was able to experience listening to you right now. So you are the walking embodiment of what you are teaching, which is not something you mentioned, but is what you imply, that we affect other people by being what you were intermittently today in our discussion. And that becomes a way of influencing other people, which is a very more important part of all of creating a heaven on earth, the same term I use, that I want to be able to also see it, because man, this can be a lot of fun right here. I just don't just talk about love. Love is part of it, but it can be a lot of fun, a lot of laugh, a lot of dancing around, a lot of learning interesting things. I mean, it's a penal colony, but there's a lot of fun stuff happening that we as curious children can like uncover and see what's here. And that's what I like, is like, what?
Well,
What's
joy
that?
is our natural birthright. And all I'm saying is, why are we still stuck in the mud when we can be dancing on the clouds? I mean, I don't understand it from a pure uh, Skinnerian point of view. Why are we choosing the negative reinforcement? Why do we keep pressing the lever to be shocked when we can, enjoy uh, pleasure and happiness? We can have it so much better than what we do.
We can. And that's why I wanted to talk with you, John,
Yeah.
because we can. And a lot of this change starts with people envisioning what it can be, envisioning what we can have, imagining a future. And I still like the cosmic choreography. I add not only the music, but also the visual part of it. So it's like a big movie. And we are in a movie,
Yes.
we are creating, and
Yes.
we can imagine, as you suck in the mud versus dancing on a cloud, are the kinds of metaphors that are visual, that we can then strive to actualize.
Amen. That's why I wrote the book.
While you wrote the book, and that's really my life right now, is headed in that direction. Has been for quite a while, and synchronicity has been an aspect of that, but that's not enough. There's more, and love is fundamental. And fundamental to me, again, is the problem of what you described as the grandiosity or narcissism, or what you use, the self-aggrandizement of human beings now. They got to be the better than somebody else. And that is a huge problem, especially in the United States. I think
Yeah.
this is the apex of narcissism. I'm only out for myself,
Yes.
and here is where, if we can make the change, it'll reverberate more in the world, because there's much more to change here. So we're going to have to end in a minute or two, and I want to leave us with where people can get your book again, so you can say it, what it is, and any other final comments you'd like to have.
Sure. Well, the book is called Love by the Light, True Stories of Divine Providence and Intervention. It's available at Amazon.com. The website is called affirminggod.com or eternia.org, Eternea. And I suppose the other thing I want to say is I try to simplify it for people to kind of carry on with your last thought. We are in a very narcissistic society, me-oriented, very self-absorbed around self-importance. And sadly, having directed 2 hospice programs, I've seen a lot of people go through mental meltdown at the end because they can't take any of this with them. It's like John Lennon said in one of his songs. Last night, the wife said, "Oh boy, when you're dead, you don't take nothing with you but your soul. Think." So our worship of the golden calf, as seductive as it is a dead end, and it leaves you empty at the end of the road. So I say choose the golden rule over the golden calf if you want to play the long game and keep your eye on the prize, because this lifetime, we're here today and gone tomorrow, and it goes by, as I say, like the blinking of an eyelid. So do not put your treasure where dust and moth doth corrode.
You got a bunch of them, John. You got a bunch of them. And it's been a pleasure feeling your love emanating and feeling it in my heart, and also listening to your epithets, because you got a bunch of those too. So I thank you. I thank you very much for being with me today on this podcast and letting me get to know you and our audience.
Thank you, Bernie, for helping me spread the word and for good work you're doing. Very important work you're doing.
Thank you very much, John.
This psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, like a hologram of cosmic consciousness.